Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. Thank you so much for 6,000 subscribers. As promised, I have put a link to a Google form for the election night in both the description. I'll also pin it in the comments once this comes out, so please do fill that out. And again, thank you so much. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election and some elections beyond that too. This will be the first of two parts talking about coalitions for each party and looking at which coalition I think for the long term is better. Now, what I mean by that is, do I think in an average election, maybe 10, 15 years from now, will Democrats be in a better position to win, or will it be Republicans? And so we're looking at trends a lot. This isn't like a video where I just look at the trends of each and every state because some states aren't competitive, right? It doesn't really matter whether Wyoming swings 2 points to the left in the next 20 years because it will still be won by Republicans easily. But I want to look at swing states specifically. And so the best way to do that is by looking at the average victory. With that being said, I do want to get into it here by filling out the states first that I think we don't really need to talk about. And I'll fill in some of the states I'd usually characterize as likely Democratic, like Virginia, Minnesota, New Mexico. I'd usually put in the likely column, as what I do with New Hampshire. But for all intents and purposes, these are Democratic voting blocks. Same with Nebraska's 2nd district. And so in the future, I think a state like New Hampshire, Virginia, or Nebraska too, those areas aren't going to be competitive down the line. And I think you can make the argument for Michigan. I'm not going to put it there just yet because I do want to briefly talk about it. But these are kind of the guaranteed electoral votes. And it's essentially what Hillary Clinton won in 2016 minus Nevada. And so that's a pretty good starting point, I'd say, for Democrats. They're likely to win these states consistently for the next 20 years at least. And so that's why I do want to start out here, because these states, to me, maybe in a worst case scenario, Democrats would lose them, right? Like, say you had 100 universes, right? And there were presidential elections held in 100 of them, or in all of them, rather. There'd be like 7 universes where Democrats lost the presidency by a landslide, like maybe like they'd lose New Mexico and Minnesota. And maybe there's a scenario in which they somehow win back Iowa and Texas and Florida. But again, those are like the extreme scenarios in very weird universes, right? In our universe, scenarios are, especially in this day and age, electoral scenarios are very likely to be generic. And what I mean by that is the electorate is so polarized that there's only a few states that can swing back and forth, and the range of outcomes we're going to see is significantly smaller. So, for example, in 2020, Biden won the popular vote by 7 million, which was only 2 million less than what Obama won by in 2008. But Biden did not win Indiana. He did not win Iowa, did not win Ohio, did not win Florida or North Carolina. And obviously he won Arizona and Georgia. But when you look at the 2008 electoral map and you go state by state, Obama did very well in a lot of red states. Like, most people don't know this. Obama only lost Missouri by like 10,000 votes. He was within like 0.2% of beating McCain in Missouri. He was within, I think, 3 points of winning Montana. He came within single digits in both of the Dakotas. So the range of outcomes that we're seeing in any given state is significantly smaller than what it was even 15 years ago. And so for all intents and purposes going forward, the scenario we're talking about today will only be an average scenario, right? I won't talk about the best case or the worst case. Let's talk about an average election, an election that would kind of be in the middle of the two extremes. And so let's talk about that. And I think that kind of segues into Michigan, because I think Michigan is competitive, yes, and in 2020 it was only decided by around 3%, but it's a left-running state, I would say. And in addition to that, it is a state that I don't think Democrats would be losing unless they've already lost the presidency. There's no scenario in which Michigan is the tipping point state, because if Michigan is the tipping point state, or is a close state rather, Democrats have already lost Pennsylvania, they've already lost Wisconsin, they've probably already lost Arizona and Nevada, and so maybe they win Michigan by like a point in that scenario, but they're not winning they're not winning nationwide. So Michigan to me isn't really worth talking about too much. I want to acknowledge it's competitive, but I want to talk about other states in this video. So I do want to fill out the Republican states I don't really want to talk about. Some of them I'll leave blank, like Texas, for example, and Florida we'll briefly dive into. But for all intents and purposes, most of these Republican states aren't gonna change the way they vote, right? Like Ohio and Iowa, I'm gonna give to the Republicans. Same with Maine's 2nd district. Florida, I'm gonna give them to because I think it's kind of the reverse Michigan. But I will say, I guess long term, I don't know how to feel about it if I'm a Democrat, because they're obviously going to continue to see losses in Miami region, but in 2020, they actually did pretty well in Tampa. They did well in Orlando, and they did very well in Jacksonville. They actually flipped the mayoral position this year. So Florida long term is going to stay red, but I think it'll be interesting to watch just locally. But either way, these remaining states are the truly competitive states. These are the states that I think in any given election 10 years from now, we can make an argument about. But before we talk about them, there are a couple states that I do want to kind of fill in here. And again, we're talking about the Democrats this video, so it'll be kind of from their perspective. It's how can they get to 270? How can they build the best or the easiest path to get to 270? And you could say, again, you could do it a number of different ways. You could say, well, they could just win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and they're 270 on the dot. Okay. Or if you're a believer in the South, you could say, well, they're going to win Arizona, Georgia, and one of Nevada, North Carolina, maybe Texas. Doesn't matter, because if they just take one of them, they're fine. And if you're if you want to make it interesting, you could say, well, what if Democrats kind of had a mix? What if they were able to win Nevada and Arizona, win Alaska, and take one of the remaining states? And I think that would be the least likely scenario. But again, in 2008, no one would have predicted that the Democrats would be winning Arizona but losing Ohio by 8 points. So it's just worth talking about. Although Alaska, I do think for this video, it's only 3 electoral votes. I'm going to give it to the Republicans, but I do think it's kind of interesting because it is a left-trending state long term. Either way, though, let's talk about these states from here. Of these yellow states, what is the best state for Democrats 8 to 10 years from now? And I think the answer is Georgia. Georgia, to me, is a state that Democrats should be really feeling good about because in 2020, they were not in a position to win Georgia. Like, if you look at the rest of the South, Democrats did not do very well in a lot of these states. Florida, Biden lost by more than Clinton. He did better in most of these other states, but he didn't, Biden was expected to win North Carolina by a lot of people. He lost it. Biden was expected to come within 15 or come within 12 of winning Mississippi, and he lost it by almost 17. So when you look at the South, Biden did mediocre at best in most of these other states, and he won Georgia, which was exceeding almost everyone's expectations, including mine. If you watched my 2020 prediction, I had every state correct except for Georgia because I thought Trump was going to win Georgia by a couple points. So when Biden won Georgia in an environment that otherwise was pretty not that great for him, it says a lot about how the state's trending. Additionally, in 2022, I'm not going to pull it up because I think we all know what happened, but in 2022, Raphael Warnock not only beat Herschel Walker, but he beat him by 3 points in a December runoff in a year where Democrats did not have a turnout advantage. In fact, the turnout of that electorate was Trump plus 5. The people that voted in that December runoff had voted for Trump by 5% in 2020. Give or take maybe 2 points on either side because it is an exit poll, and exit polls are very susceptible to weird margins of error. But regardless, when you have an electorate that was Republican just 2 years prior and then they vote for a Democrat by 3% in a runoff, that's pretty substantial. And I think when you look at the swings in urban areas across the state, especially in Atlanta Metro, I don't see our Republicans can be winning this 10 years from now. I think they're in trouble here for 2024, and I think it is a very hard state for them to win in 2028 or 2032 because, again, this area is growing at lightning speed. Democrats are doing better every election. They've been doing better every election for 8 to 10 years now. And unless the Republicans can somehow, miraculously reverse these numbers in the suburbs, which they probably can't, if we're being honest, Georgia will not be within play for them even in 10 years from now. And so that's, I think, the number one state if I'm a Democrat. Now, the rest of these states to me are interesting because you could go Arizona, you could go Pennsylvania, you could go with Wisconsin, but I'm going to go with Arizona here because I want to stick with the trends, and I also want to make it fun because even if they win Arizona, they don't have the path to 270. This is where it gets complicated for them because this is, by the way, this is the Republicans' best path, is winning the rest of these states now that I've established Arizona and Georgia to be blue. So, obviously, Democrats, it's no easy feat for them to win the presidency. They still have to do a lot of things here. But either way, let's give them Arizona, and let's talk about Arizona, right? Just future. In 2020, Biden did, I think, 5 points better than Hillary Clinton in Maricopa County, and that's good. I would say it actually isn't too impressive. What I think is impressive is how well he did in Atlanta. This is sufficient. It won him the state, but I don't think it's knocking my socks off. Either way, though, Maricopa is a left-trending county, first of all. Democrats won in every statewide race in Arizona last year except for the treasurer race. But again, treasurer races don't really say too much about the electorate as a whole. If you believe in treasurer races, you think Iowa's a swing state. You think, I don't know, Democrats held the treasurership in Oklahoma recently. Same with Kentucky, and Republicans held it in Vermont. And down ballot races, as I'm sure most of you guys are aware, are not indicative of a state's trends. But either way, Democrats won Maricopa in the Senate race. They won it in the governor race. They won it in the SOS race. They won it in the AG race. And so when you have a county that's consistently voting for Democrats since 2018, really, it's hard to see how that flips. And again, Republicans haven't won a Senate race here since 2016. A lot of people forget that. A lot of people like to think Arizona is still a 50-50 state. The last time Republicans won a Senate race was 2016 when John McCain ran for that seat and defeated Ann Kirkpatrick. McCain died in August of 2018, and the Democratic Party won this. The governor appointed Martha McSally to fill his seat until the next election, which was 2020. There was a special election held. Democrats won that special election. In 2018, Sinema, who's no longer a Democrat but ran as a Democrat, defeated Martha McSally. And then in 2022, Mark Kelly won re-election to a full term. And so Republicans are 0 for 3 in Senate races since 2016. They are 0 for 1 in competitive governor's races. In 2018, they had an incumbent who was very popular, who was not seriously contested by the Democrats. And on top of that, they haven't actually won the presidency here since 2016, again, where Trump won it over Hillary Clinton, because in 2020, Biden won it. In 2024, I will bet you that if it's Trump versus Biden, I bet Biden wins Arizona again. And so this is a state that Republicans have kind of had a slump in recently, and I don't see how they recover from that, especially when you look at, like, Maricopa County. There's a lot of people here, right? Biden got 1 million votes here. That's massive. That is a huge amount of votes, right? Like, the average county that Democrats win might give them 80,000 votes, if that. I haven't done the math on it, but, like, if I go to even California, just a blue state, and I just go to a random county, they got 48,000 votes here. They got 160,000 votes here, and they got 105,000 votes here. And that's California. If I go to, like, Minnesota and I go to a random Democratic county, it's smaller. So this is a massive county, and it's growing. The Phoenix metro area is one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country. It's trending towards Democrats. So that is a very hard thing for Republicans to overcome. And that's why I think Arizona is the next best bet for Democrats. But after that, they need to win one more state. And I think at this point, you got to go back to the Rust Belt. You got to go to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a state that Democrats, I think, should be worried about a little bit, but they're still going to do fine there. Biden in 2020 was a good candidate for Pennsylvania. You can see that. He actually did very well in the northeastern corner of the state, and that's mostly because he's from there, I would say. But long-term, Democrats aren't going to win Pennsylvania through Scranton and Erie anymore. They used to, now they're not. They're going to win it through the suburbs of Philadelphia, which are very big, trended big towards Biden in 2020, and getting really good margins out of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is not what you'd expect to be a left-trending city, but in 2020, Biden did 4 points better than Clinton, and Fetterman did like 7% better there than Biden. So I would say do well in the Philadelphia suburbs and Pittsburgh, and Democrats win the presidency. And Pennsylvania, I know we're all tired of Pennsylvania being the most important state, but it is. The Republicans in the future need to have Pennsylvania because I don't think they're winning Georgia. I don't think they're winning Arizona unless they can get a miracle out of Minnesota or Michigan or Colorado, which is unlikely. They need Pennsylvania. And if Democrats can win that, they've won the presidency. It doesn't matter to me whether they win the rest of these states because I think they're not necessary. They'd love to have Texas, but I don't think they need it. And so that's kind of where I'm at here. The Democratic coalition is a mixed coalition. They would benefit from maybe improving in a state like Wisconsin. It would kind of give them breathing room if they lost Arizona. But realistically, they need to maintain their gains in the South. And they have an advantage here because they don't need to flip any states. Like Texas, North Carolina are left trending states broadly speaking. And I think they could flip in the future. In the future, obviously, not now, but in the future. But the great thing for Democrats is that they don't even need them to flip. They'd like them to flip. They don't need them to flip. They just need to hold on to Arizona and Georgia, and they need to just hold on to one of their Rust Belt states, whether that be Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or Nevada. But Nevada, I've made videos about why I don't think it's a great state for Democrats long term. And so that's the coalition. And I think Republicans are going to have a really hard time threading this needle because they need to win all these remaining yellow states and one of the 3 blue states I talked about today. And that's going to be hard for them to do. So I would say long-term, the presidency benefits the Democrats if the trends we are aware of right now continue. Things could change. Obviously, it's hard to predict elections 10 years from now. But I think in an average election, this is what Democrats would this is kind of like the tipping point for Democrats. Like maybe they'd win in North Carolina or Texas, but I think the states that they'd win that would pile up to 270 before you add in the extras would be this group of states. So that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you like this content that I'm putting out, please subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with a friend if you think they would enjoy it, and I appreciate it. So I'll see you in the next one, which will be part 2 for the Republicans.